Once upon a time, in 1150 AD, there was an English knight named Sir Harold who lived on a manor owned by a man called Duke Edward Smith. Duke Edward ran a very successful manor with many large fields and serfs. Duke Edward treated his serfs very poorly. The serfs lived in clammy, cramped houses, often with one bale of hay for an entire family to eat off of. In the winter, it was so cold, serfs brought pigs into their homes to warm the floor. Duke Edward lived in a huge castle on the manor. If the manor was attacked, he had an obligation to allow all manor residents into the castle for protection. Then, along with the knights, the serfs and peasants on the manor would defend the castle against any enemy.
Sir Harold had been informed that the English king, King Richard, with fellow leaders, Philip II of France and Frederick I of Germany, were leading a journey to recapture Jerusalem. This journey was called the Third Crusade. Sir Harold and fellow knights on the manor had decided to join the monarchs in their quest to reconquer Jerusalem. Harold decided this on March 20th. 2 days later, he left on his journey. Sir Harold would have to travel across much of England to then get on a boat to France. England was one of the most prosperous countries of the time. England officially had begun in 1066 when William the Conqueror conquered England. One of the first laws in England was Magna Carta. King John was a very corrupt man and a weak leader. Therefore, the nobles forced King John to sign Magna Carta.
The document guaranteed basic rights and limited the king's power. Sir Harold and the other knights from the manor who were making the journey stopped in a small manor close by the English coast. In this manor, Harold and the fellow knights saw the economic system known as a guild. A guild is a group of people that have the same occupation that work to improve conditions of jobs. The noble in the manor agreed to allow the knights to stay one night at the manor if they could beat his knights in a tournament. Tournaments were competitions where the knights would charge each other. These tournaments were usually very bloody and competitive. The winners could demand large ransoms. Sir Harold and the knights who came with him agreed to the tournament. After a long bloody battle, Sir Harold was the last one standing on his side, but he willed himself into defeating 3 enemy knights to win the battle. Sir Harold's side was able to spend the night at the manor. All knights like Sir Harold were expected to follow the code of chivalry.
The code of chivalry required knights to protect the weak and the poor, but the 3 most important people for a knight to protect were his feudal lord, heavenly lord, and his lady. Most knights like Sir Harold disregarded the code and treated peasants poorly. To become a knight, Sir Harold had to go through a series of stages starting with a page. Early the next morning, Sir Harold and his fellow knights left to the English coast. They boarded a ship and crossed the English Channel. Once arriving in France, Harold and the others saw massive Gothic cathedrals. They had flying buttresses, tall pointed spires, and stained glass windows. Gothic cathedrals featured pointed arches.
Then there was a huge storm. The knights had nowhere to stay, so they went in a monastery for hospitality. Monasteries were religious communities where people called monks devoted their life to God. Then, the storm continued for 7 days, so the knights remained in the monastery for the duration of that time. The monks had a very strict set of rules that the knights followed as well while in the monastery. Monasteries contained libraries and were educated so the monks could read books. To pass the time in the monastery, Harold read books about Jesus and Jerusalem. Harold also learned that nuns were women who lived the same lifestyle as monks. Sir Harold specifically read a book about the church hierarchy and priests, bishops, and archbishops.
He learned that below the popes were archbishops, who controlled an area of the church. Below archbishops in the hierarchy were bishops, who were in charge of a few local churches, and below bishops were priests, who had power of 1 or 2 churches. When the storm finally ended, after a week, Sir Harold and the others thanked the monks and were on their way. They set out through the French countryside on their way to meet all of the Crusaders in the Holy Roman Empire. France was united under Charlemagne, but currently the Capetian family controlled the throne. France was a Western European nation that was powerful at the Middle Ages. Sir Harold and the others recognized that France was known for its enormous, intricate cathedrals. When the long journey was finally over and they had reached their destination in the Holy Roman Empire, they met up with the other Crusaders.
Pope Boniface VIII addressed the Crusaders as to why they were going to Jerusalem. Boniface VIII who was famed for his document that said kings must obey the Pope. A few days after that was addressed, Harold and his fellow crusaders found out the plague was spread. Harold noticed many people coughing and people with black spots on their skin, and many rats running through the streets. All of them decided to keep on going to Constantinople. The journey to Constantinople was long and some men died, but after the haul most of the crusaders survived. In Constantinople, the leaders of the crusade talked battle strategy while invading Jerusalem. They heard about Genghis Khan and the Mongols ravaging much of Asia on horseback. Khan was the universal Mongol ruler and was an exceptional organizer and strategist. He organized his armies, from armies of 10,000 down to squads of 10. The Mongols conquered much of Asia under Genghis Khan. They instilled fear into many. Because of this, King Richard and the other crusade leaders decided it would be best strategy to ride into Jerusalem on horses and quickly control it.
When the knights were all prepared with weapons and supplies, the crusaders set out for Jerusalem. They wasted no time and swiftly attacked Jerusalem, but the Muslim leader and Kurdish warrior Saladin responded quickly and put his troops into battle. Sir Harold was charging toward Saladin on his horse when his horse was cut down and Harold was beheaded by an enemy warrior. King Richard's and Saladin's armies fought long and hard, but in the end there was no victor. Richard the Lionhearted, as he became known, and Saladin agreed to a truce. This truce allowed Christians to visit Jerusalem, but the city itself remained under Saladin's control. The long journey for Sir Harold ended sadly, but he felt he died with honor fighting for a good cause.